What is up? Man, it is a nice and cold Tuesday. Yeah, we've been doing this on Tuesdays. So if you join in, you have any questions, drop them down. I guess you can't see that if you're not on here, so it doesn't really matter. Today we're talking about fat. This is kind of, I guess, part 3 in our series. I don't really have a number of parts, but kind of since we're going in order, I'll consider it part 3. The last 2 times we talked about proteins, we talked about carbohydrates. Today is fats. Next week, we'll probably talk about how to wrap it all together. But mainly today, I wanted to impress the idea, one, that fats don't necessarily make you fat, and what fats are, right? Good fat versus bad fat, and those kind of things. If you gotta pardon me, I'm having my coffee too, so professional, not professional, whatever. Fats, what are they? They are, or what do they do for us? They provide your body with energy, just like carbohydrates in that sense, not similar to how they provide the energy. What we're looking at here is more where carbohydrates are more aerobic and somewhat anaerobic, or excuse me, carbohydrates are more anaerobic and somewhat aerobic. Fats are mainly aerobic, meaning your exercise and your intensity levels are way low. Think slow jogging, walking, just moving around. You would need more fat to supply your energy for that kind of stuff than you would carbohydrates. The heat just kicked on here, so it's getting hot. So looking at it from that perspective, since we have carbs and fats, we can kind of decide how much we need based on our exercise types, based on our intensity levels and things like that. If you're somebody who is just a casual jogger all the time, walks a lot, doesn't do a lot of heavy weightlifting, you're probably going to need a little bit more fat than carbohydrate. So we get into what else does fat do? It helps your hormones. There are some safe levels in both amounts of intake and dietary fat and in relation to your body fat that we can discuss really quick. So like for the intake of body fat, ladies, I don't recommend dropping below probably 35 grams of fat per day. That's pretty low, keep in mind. And that's really easy to hit just eating lean meats, eggs, things like that without adding much fat, or any for that matter. Guys, your safe zone is that 40 to 50 grams of fat per day. I wouldn't recommend going much below that in a daily basis. And if you're not tracking and measuring, you don't really have an idea what that is. It's going to be, if you're just eating, like I just said, if you're just eating the common stuff, lean chicken, lean beef, things like that, 4 to 5 times a day, without adding any fat, you're going to hit those basic requirements. This is where addition of those good fats that we're going to talk about here in a minute will come in handy to get a little bit extra. Fat is part of your cell membranes, right? Part of your cells. Fat is in your brain. It helps your nervous system. So if we don't have a good amount of dietary fat that we're ingesting, we don't get some of that stuff that's necessary and vital for our body processes. I failed to mention earlier when I started this, just like our other 2 videos, this is not going to be overly sciencey. So we're not going to get into particles and things like that. Just give you a good basis of kind of what they do and why fats are important in your diet. Fat also helps transport fat-soluble vitamins throughout your bodies, things like K, vitamin D, E. Without fat in your bloodstream, taking those vitamins, it's just going to go right through you and not be able to put it where it needs. So if you're not ingesting a lot of dietary fat, or if you're taking those vitamins outside of ingesting fat, then they're not going to really go to where they need to go. That's why if you look on vitamins that are like that, the supplements with vitamin D, K, E, sometimes they're mixed with olive oil or some form of oil to help shuttle that particular vitamin to where it needs to go. I think we could get into what kind of fats we have. You know, you hear a lot about saturated fats, unsaturated fats. Saturated fats, the scary ones, they're not scary. That's a whole nother argument itself. Just know that ingesting saturated fats is not going to kill you unless you have other metabolic processes going on that may have some issues. Back on point. You have saturated fats, which are things like butter, coconut oil, cocoa butter, animal fats. These are the ones that are going to be kind of solid at room temperature. And then when you throw them into a hot pan, they melt, right? Great for cooking. They're more stable for cooking. Then we have the unsaturated fats, which are monosaturated or monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats. Monounsaturated fats are things like plant oils, some plant seeds, more seeds in general are on the other side, but plant oils, some nuts or most of the nuts, and some of the animal fats. Polyunsaturated, you have your fish oils, like cod liver oil, standard fish oil, krill oil, things like that, and then most seeds in general. So knowing that, your best bet is to be focusing on eating stuff that's rich in monosaturated fats and omega-3s and omega-6s, which is a form of polyunsaturated fat. And then leave the saturated fats as maybe fillers for cooking or things like that instead of just throwing them on top. You see stuff like bulletproof coffee, which is great. You know, that kind of stuff, it really produces long-term satiating effect. It's just, you know, some saturated fats not gonna kill you. A whole lot of it's probably not great for you, especially if you have some issues going on. But we want to really balance them out across the board. It comes here to note that eating fat's not going to make you fat. It's not fat that is getting stored as fat unless you're overeating it, which if you're overeating in general tends to have a fat storage effect. Fat stores more easily as fat, especially in a caloric excess versus I can't think of the word right off the top of that. Staying under your caloric needs. But it's easy to overdo. And you can think about this by if you just grab random handfuls of nuts throughout the day, then all of a sudden you've ingested 2,000 calories in nuts. You have your fats, which are 9 calories per gram of fat, whereas proteins and carbs are 4 calories per gram of fat. So just keep in mind, it's really easy to overdo fat, but eating fat's not necessarily going to make you fat, especially if we tend to keep it for guys between if you're eating a balanced diet with some carbohydrates, proteins, vegetables, guys keep it under the 100-gram range, ladies under the 50 to 75 range, probably 75 and under. It really depends on your body weight too. So focus on the quality of the fat and not so much the quantity, although quantity does matter to some extent. Quality, really quick, that'll be kind of the last touch point here. We talked a little bit about omega-6 and omega-3 earlier. Checking on questions there. I missed some last time. Omega-3s is things like your fish oils. They're found in animal fats. They're found in some seeds. Omega-6s are found in animal fats, especially not great sourced animal fats where they tend to be a little bit higher than omega-3s. But you want to have a balance of those that's a little bit closer in range, meaning our standard diet right now, the standard American diet has, I think it's a 20 to 1 ratio, where you want more of a 1 to 10 ratio on that, 1 being the omega-3, 1 being, or 10 being the omega-6. Eating foods that are rich in, or processed foods tend to be more rich in omega-6s, which helps skew that number. So if you live off of processed foods or refined foods, they're going to have more of these pro-inflammatory fats in them than, say, sourcing your foods from free-range cows, turkey, chicken, wild-caught fish, things like that. If you, I guess the goal here would be focus on eating more plant and animal foods that are natural and wild sourced or free range sourced than eating more foods that are processed. The last little bit here, we'll be talking about trans fat, which is on the out, by the way. But trans fats, if you've heard those, they were really big a few years ago. And that was bred out of taking a polyunsaturated fat and making it essentially saturated. You make it saturated by injecting hydrogen into it, and it hardens it up. So you had those things that are now very commercially stable for companies that are making foods, processing foods. They have this fat that can stay stable while it's in a package or to cook with. It's cheaper, and unknown until years later was very detrimental to your health. It has some higher impacts on your body because your body just doesn't process them the same as it would a normal polyunsaturated fat or monounsaturated fat or saturated fat. So if you see things on a package that's listed with hydrogenated oils or partially hydrogenated oils, that's going to be a trans fat. There's some naturally occurring trans fats in animal products that we eat, if you eat them, that have shown up. It's more in organ type stuff, which is shown to not be detrimental, has a different kind of process. So fake fats, artificially produced fats, have a negative impact on your health, very pro-inflammatory. And so getting them out of your diet in general is going to be your best bet on that one. So to reiterate, focus on more monounsaturated fats, again, which is your plant oils and your nuts. Plant oils being like olive oils, things like that, avocado oils. Then you have your polyunsaturated fats, which are seeds and fish oils. Somebody's knocking on my door, so I don't know who that is. We'll wrap this up, and if there's any questions, hold on one second, guys. You are interrupting my Facebook Live, bro. Lance, ladies and gentlemen. Quick question. Yeah. Let me see.
This is bad for business. Actually,
Yep, I'm sorry. All right, back. Jamie Jakes, can I eat peanut butter out of the jar? Yes, you can. If you eat all of it, you will get fat because it is calorically dense. But you know that. I think you had to get it out of your house. We've had this discussion. but it's valid nonetheless. Again, fat's really easy over to do. Just for other people watching, you can eat it. Know that 2 tablespoons is a serving, and it's not the normal size that you think it is. It's not a heaping tablespoon. Figure it out. But eating too much of that, especially if you're eating other things over a period of the day, could be detrimental to your waistline. I'm really flustered about the interruption there. I'm sorry. The final point I want to make here, guys, is kind of ties in with everything else we talked about with carbs and proteins. If you really focus on getting them from natural sources, from those oils or good oils, plant oils, and from seeds and from nuts and from good sourced animal products, you're going to find a good balance in that. There's really no need to try to add some fat every meal, although sticking in line with how we've been trying to break down servings for people for the proteins and the carbs. Ladies, if you're eating 3 to 5 meals a day, all you need to do is add in what we like to call a thumb of fat to your meal, which could be like a tablespoon or a half to a full tablespoon of oil, probably a few slivers of avocado, half a handful of nuts, something of that. Again, it's really easy to overdo, so that's why we try to give you some constraint there. Guys, if you're eating 3 to 5 meals a day, sometimes 6, you would use 2. That's a good guideline for staying underneath that 100-gram range. Ladies, it's a good guideline for y'all to stay underneath that 75-gram range. I appreciate all y'all for joining in. And if you have any other questions, feel free to throw them into the comments. I'll answer them whenever we see them, or if you want to reach out to me directly, brandon@grapevine-crossfit.com. I'm happy to help you out any way that I can in relation to this. Next week, we're going to talk about bringing all this together, performance stuff, how much you need to be eating using your hands. We can talk a little bit about macros, the counting method of weighing, measuring, and anything else you want to do. If you have a topic you want me to cover in one of these series, shoot it over to me, same email address. I'd love to answer it. In the meantime, have a great Tuesday. We'll catch up next week, and I hope everybody has a great week. Thanks again. Oh, okay, sorry, I missed the question. Kyle Joyce, is butter good for you? It's a saturated fat, so yes and no. It's the same thing with any other fat. If you're eating it all the time and it's your main source of fat, probably not. You can have better options. Kerrygold makes a good grass-fed butter. That's the kind I would go through. Regular butter tends to be a little bit skewed on that 3-to-6 ratio. So I would gear more towards, and the CLA content, I would gear more towards a quality source butter if that's going to be your stick. And the same thing with some of the stuff, it doesn't take much butter to add on calories, right? So just don't focus on throwing a whole lot in there. A tablespoon or less, which would be a little pad, is going to be considered your thumb of fat, right? Not a half a stick. Half a stick goes way too much, sometimes a thumb not too much, but it'll give it at least a little bit of flavor. So thanks for the question. We will talk to y'all next week, and have a great Tuesday.